Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. If you are joining us here, hopefully you are here for Making the Days of Awe Truly Awesome, Rabbi S.B. Gershoni's multi-part series, getting ready for the high holidays, which are getting very close. Um, I will not say anything further, but I will hand it over to our teacher, our presenter today and every day in this course, Rabbi S.B. Gershoni.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben, and welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. So I want to start today with a little story from my personal experience of something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. Between our second class and our third, I had the opportunity to visit an extraordinary international arts festival that takes place every year in the Nevada desert called Burning Man. Some of you have probably heard of Burning Man, and some of you maybe have been to Burning Man. I don't know how much folks here know about it, but I'll just explain for context that it's a city. It really is a city. About 70,000 people attend, and the city is gridded in the shape of a clock face with radial streets, 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30, and so forth, and circumferential streets alphabetically A, B, C, D, E, and so forth. At the center of the clock is a huge statue that looks a bit like a person, a bit. It's a sort of humanoid statue. And at 12 o'clock, the clock face actually is only from 2 until 10. And at 12 o'clock is a building called the Temple. I'm going to share my screen to share a couple of pictures, hopefully, of the temple. This year's temple, anyway. Each year it's designed by a different team of architects. And as you can see, it's quite beautiful. And I don't know whether this was the original vision to have a temple. There's one every year, always in the same place. But it becomes a portal for people to do a lot of expression of their grief. This is the temple seen from above. So you go there and you find throughout the week people sitting there in quiet meditation, people crying, people put up memorials, whether simple or elaborate, to people, and sometimes to pets and other beloveds that they have lost. And on the Saturday night, the culmination of the festival, there's a huge party where the man is burned with great firework displays and so forth, and it goes wild. And then on the Sunday night, most of Sunday, of course, is spent taking down your camp and packing up and dismantling everything. On the Sunday night, people gather again to burn the temple. Now, for Jews, we probably have quite a lot of associations with the idea of a temple being burnt, but let me tell you, it doesn't feel at all like an act of destruction. It actually feels like an incredibly sacred and holy time. And it's remarkable to experience this portal of grief because probably most of us have observed there isn't a lot of space in secular society for grieving, for mourning, and many people need much more access to collective ritual or just personal space for mourning and grieving than they get. So when it comes time for the temple to burn, there are literally tens of thousands of people gathered around in complete quiet, watching with great solemnity and attention as the structure gradually, section by section, is taken by flames and collapses. And this takes, maybe half an hour. So I was standing on Sunday night 2 weeks ago watching the temple burn, and it put me in mind of this course, this topic that we've been discussing, because as I watched the temple burn and I thought about the time that I had spent there during the week and the limits to my personal work there, the things that I could have said or could have done, the time that I could have spent in prayer there, or the memorials I could have constructed to people I've lost, or even to other aspects of my life that have passed away now. And I thought about how much I hadn't done that I could have done. I was struck by the similarity of that to the process of personal tshuva that we're undertaking during these weeks, and the sense of incompleteness that often accompanies them. And in contrast to this, the sense of realness and relative completeness that came with this collective experience of setting a structure on fire and watching it burn, in this case, but of a collective practical act that when it was done, and everybody knew it and felt it. It was over. So that put me in mind, really, of this whole tension that Rabbi Lu is discussing through this book, namely that we do the collective act and it feels real, but there's always the potential for it to feel a little bit rote. Whereas the personal work that we try to do always feels a little bit incomplete, I think, that this is real and we're completely unprepared. However much work we do towards it, there's always this feeling of being a bit unprepared. So with that kind of opening idea, I'd like to invite folks into an investigation of a deeper feeling into that tension of the group versus the personal practice. And we'll start by reading the section at the beginning of the chapter about Selichot. I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, hang on. Let me give you the link to the source sheet. Those who want to pull it up in their own browser, please do so. And get on. Here's the source sheet in the chat box. You can copy and paste that link. And I will share my screen so that those for whom that's easier can hopefully just see it here. Here we are. So could I ask someone please to, and you'll have to raise your hand, otherwise, raise your hand with the icon, otherwise I can't see you with my screen shared. Please could somebody read for us the second source, which comes from pages 99 and 100 of This is Real and You're Completely Unprepared, where it's with the heading Empty but Important Traditions, which is my heading. I know there's someone who wants to read. JCC of LBI. Would you read for us?
Forgive me, I didn't change my name. This is Michael J.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. Thank you so much for your classes. They're wonderful.
Thanks.
And meaningful. Please imagine this. You are out for a social evening with those very close to you, family or close friends or both. The evening begins with a wonderful dinner, and then, out of some vague sense, or perhaps a very strong sense of family, tradition, and obligation, you all go off after dinner to participate in a basically empty religious ritual. Or perhaps you are by yourself, but you attend this empty ritual because you have very pleasant associations of having done so with your family and friends back in Cleveland or Detroit or New Jersey or wherever. Or perhaps it is not so empty for you. Perhaps you feel a great deal at this service, but you're really not sure if it's you or the service, if it's the ritual itself, or the peculiar pain you've been feeling in your heart lately. Or perhaps you feel very little, but every year you harbor the hope that you will feel something this time, even though you never really do, and you always feel a little disappointed about this. But you don't really mind attending the ritual. After all, it's tradition. And even though you are sleepy from all the food, the music is lovely, and the officiant is sometimes mildly amusing when he speaks. But basically, you go not because you anticipate that anything significant will happen, but rather because this is what the family does every year at this time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. And before we discuss, could I have a different voice, another volunteer, to read the next source, number 3, unpreparedness and insufficiency, and then we'll discuss. Barbara.
All our resolutions and strategies for coping, all our attempts to manipulate reality to get cute with life, are thin reeds in the face of this immensity. Even if we've spent months preparing when we reach this moment, we realize we are utterly unprepared. And this is what we call heartbreak. Heartbreak is precisely the feeling that we have done our best. We have given it our all, but it hasn't been enough, not nearly enough. And that is what it means when we say, God is close to the brokenhearted. And this is what it means when we say, An banu ma'asim, we have no good deeds. We realize we have greatly overestimated our cleverness and our potency. We have overestimated the efficacy of our conscious behavior, and we have underestimated the persistence and the depth of our destructive tendencies. We realize that our attempts to do good are very small next to the unconscious havoc we constantly wreak to our right and to our left. What is our life? What is our goodness? What are righteousness?
Thank you so much, Barbara. So, do folks know what I'm talking about when I mention this tension and the potential failings of both approaches, both the collective approach that can feel empty and the personal approach which can feel incomplete and insufficient? I'm curious to hear, what do you think of this? Is this a tension that feels live to you? Beth.
I don't think we're giving people enough credit here. The idea that our habitual actions are somehow getting cute with the universe is a really pejorative way of putting our psychological constructs. Our constructs are there for a reason. They're there to help us and protect us. And I don't think we should just arbitrarily assume that they're somehow all bad. And likewise with the idea that we're going to go hear Slichot, for example. And yeah, we do it every year at this time. And sometimes it strikes us more than others. But it's never going to strike us at all if we don't show up, if we don't go. So I just don't think this is giving us, either as individuals or as a group, enough credit for what we are able to do. Dibarti.
Shamati, thank you. What do other people think? If anything. Nan.
It just so happened that just prior to this class, I was reading a book by the bryologist Robin Wall Kimmerer. I'm sure lots of people have read some of her stuff, but I was reading the section about how pecan trees only flourish by that they all work together as a group, and so that one doesn't flower in a year when another one isn't doing well, but they all somehow produce their nuts together, even if one of them is more greatly endowed with the sugars that are involved in producing those nuts than the other. They all flower together. And so, when you're talking about the tension between the individual and the community, it just sort of, it hooked into that for me, the idea that we truly can only flourish as a community, that you don't really flourish on your own, no matter how much you might think you do. Or it might seem to you that you do, but you really, it's impossible. I mean, I would contend that it's really quite impossible to achieve your full human nature without, this is what Rabbi Hillel says, do not separate yourself from the community. Dibarti.
Shamati, thank you. Yes, and that's a theme that we'll come to in a little minute, and that Rabbi Lu, his chapter on Kol Nidre, comes back to focus on quite significantly. Johanna and then Jeffrey.
Hi, I'm sorry that this is a little off topic. And I mean this with respect, because you've blown my mind with talking about Burning Man. I belong to a small, bring your Jewish faith, whatever denomination you are, one size fits all, Jewish synagogue community, and our cantor is conservadox, heavily leaning into the docs. So I love what you said. The guidance that I get in Judaism is really close to Orthodox. So can you take a minute, if it's not going to interfere with your teaching for today, to help me understand how to reconcile or marry the two, the things that you did and experienced and saw in Judaism?
That's a big question. I think I'll just say that for me, Judaism is a religion that teaches us how to walk in the world. It's not about being cloistered. And although I know that there are definite strains in the Talmud of wanting Jews to live isolated from other communities, that's not really how Judaism has evolved, and it's not an ideal that I hold.
I'm referring more to the rituals, because I've heard that, I mean, I know some people who've attended it, and you know, they practice paganism, earth-based spiritual practices, not monotheistic. So that's the association I have with the event and the rituals.
Oh, well, I don't want to get too much off topic right now, but I'll just say everything is optional. You can go there and not attend any particular ritual. It's a city. There's a lot of options of things to do. I will say that I went there as part of a camp called Milk and Honey, which is a Jewish. It's not everybody in the camp is Jewish, but it has a Jewish infusion. And we led a beautiful Shabbat service, and we had over 1,000 people came to Shabbat, not all of whom were Jewish, but many were. And then afterwards we fed everybody Shabbat dinner. So there's certainly space for everybody's spiritual expression and offering, and people can choose what they participate in. So thank you for the question, and let's come back to this. I love the question, and let's stay focused right now on this, the question of Teshuvah and how we prepare for these days of awe. So Jeffrey.
I read the text less as of a critique of conventional practice and more of just looking at the tensions between the opposites and trying to put it all together. You know, I'm feeling the tension in my kishkas rather than in my intellect. And I think that when we, you know, try to break it down into more of an intellectual analysis, I think we're missing something.
Can you say more about what it is that you feel in the kishkas? In the gut?
You know, it's difficult to put into words. But I have felt that tension. You know, I feel like I've been living that tension for quite a few years, trying to break through to something deeper and more holistic, to greater wholeness. That's as best I can articulate it at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara, let's hear from you, and then I'd like to move to the next source.
Okay, so I'm just thinking that we're not prepared because we really can't do it by ourselves, but we can do it when we get together in a community. which is to me what it's all about. And I think that even in the book, like on page 110, they talk about, in 111, he talks about what gives us hope is when we get together in the community with others. All of a sudden you're frozen. Do you hear me?
I hear you. I hear you. And actually, your timing could not be more perfect, because that is in fact the piece that I would like us to read next.
Yeah, I froze.
Would somebody read for us the fourth, number 4, Gathering as a Group, which is mostly from pages 109 to 10. Danielle?
When we begin to acknowledge the fact that we are utterly unprepared for what we have to face in life, this is when the walls of the psyche begin to break down. The first thing we do during the high holidays is come together. We stand together before God as a single spiritual unit. We do this out of a very deep instinct. We need each other now. We need each other deeply. Here, in the full flush of the life and death nature of this ritual, here in the full flush of our impotence as individuals to meet this most urgent emergency, our need for each other is immense. We heal one another by being together. We give each other hope by ourselves. Ein banu ma'asim. There is nothing we can do but gather together as a single, indivisible entity. We sense that we do in fact have efficacy. Is it? Yeah, efficacy as a larger, transcendent spiritual unit. We are incomplete and imperfect and cannot survive without a spiritual community that can make us whole. That can give us what we need, what we don't have, that sense of wholeness, of completion, that we have been chasing after all of our lives, but it always eludes us as individuals, is something so deep it can only be found in a whole community, in that shifting composite of need and lack and gift we create when we come together to acknowledge that we need one another.
Beautiful, thank you. So the claim here is that we are not just more comfortable, or that we flourish better, as Robin Wall Kimmerer is saying, when we're in a group, but also that we have more spiritual agency. So do you think that's true? And do you think, as Rabbi Lou suggests, that there's an inherent fulfillment that's available as part of the collective that we can't access on our own? Danielle?
I disagree. I have more of a problem. I'm high sensitive, and when I'm at home, I can completely connect with Hashem without any difficulty whatsoever, because I'm in my own energy field. However, if I'm in the Keilah, it takes more of an effort to be that vulnerable.
Yes.
Because I'm aware of everybody else's feelings and the energy that is in the whole community and in the synagogue, and so it's more of an effort for me to be there completely in the moment with the whole community, because I'm very community minded and I'll lose myself in the other people.
Thank you. Great point. And even if we're not highly sensitive, the fact that the time for the silent Amidah has finished and now we're moving on is, when we're in a group, we're not on our own time. We're not on our own authentic spiritual train. We have to some extent, try and stay in step with what's going on around us. Thank you. Sunshine.
Oh, that was so profound. Now I feel like what I was going to say isn't very good. No, I just, I've been studying, my Havruta is actually Orthodox. It's interesting. Somebody brought that up, and she's really encouraged me to pray. And she says what's great about being a woman in an Orthodox community is she doesn't actually have to go to shul to pray. She can pray on her own, and it's so nice. And she can do it on her own time. And of course, I don't have to go to shul either, but now I'm actually doing it. I feel that way. I feel like I have my way of doing it. And I'm disabled. It's very difficult for me to get into a room with people, and most shuls aren't really that accessible anyway. So I like that right now we can all just tune in on the internet and be part of services. And last year I was just loving that I could sort of skip around to different states and countries and experience it. And so for me, it has been kind of a nice both and.
Yeah, I love the point you're making, that with the the changes to our worship patterns of the last couple of years, that's actually changed pretty significantly what we mean by being alone or in the collective, that now it can be a both and in a different way. David, and then Natalie.
Yeah, I resonated very deeply with what we just read, that there's something very powerful about being in group celebration, group worship, group prayer. To our more Orthodox brothers and sisters on the call, I think of the being in like in a group of dancing, jubilant, bearded Hasidic men who are just bringing such. I think if you do that in your house by yourself, okay, you do that out in the woods, nice. But when you're in a group like that with the Torah and the music and the whole, you let yourself go into that in a way that you can't do on your own. Likewise, there's the hitbadadu, when you go into the woods and you speak aloud to God, and that's alone. And you're going alone and you're speaking and you're getting words back from doing hitbadadu practice. So it's, why do we have to choose, right? They're both so powerful to be in practice solo, and there's just something so powerful about being in practices with other humans, but it can also be intimidating.
Thank you. Yeah, and before Natalie shares, I'll just chime in and say, I think groups can be incredibly elevating, and they can also feel incredibly alienating. Even if the group's having an amazing experience, if it's for whatever reason at odds with, and we can't get on the train, we just, we feel in grief and everyone else is in joy, or we feel excluded or not truly invited, whether because we're female or disabled or patrilineally but not matrilineally Jewish. So many reasons to feel that we're not fully in the group. The experience of being adjacent to a group can actually make us feel so much further from being able to pray on occasion. I'd love to hear from Natalie and Sandy, and I just want to say it's simply to hear a diversity of voices, that if someone has already spoken, I'm not going to call on them while there's still someone else in the queue, so please don't feel rejected. I'd love to hear more. Natalie.
Thank you. I resonated a great deal with what Danielle had to say, and also to a degree with Sunshine. When I get into a large group of people, especially at shul, I get all the noise around me, as opposed to being able to connect with what I'm there for. However, if I'm out in the woods, I have an almost immediate connection to God. I am a master gardener, and I also grow orchids at home. And so when I can't be in the woods, usually on a horse, that's my God place. So I've transferred. I mean, I live in Minneapolis, so winter here is not a lot of fun. So I have a room that's nothing but orchid plants. And that's my connection to giving back to the earth and to creation. But I go to shul and I don't feel like part of the group. I feel out of place. However, if I'm talking with my rabbi, I'm very comfortable. I feel safe. I feel protected. I feel connected. But that large group will almost immediately, it's almost like I start getting an internal anxiety attack.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
this reading has been very good for me because there's a lot of it that's very meaningful, especially here because a majority of the population is very Norwegian, Scandinavian, and the Jewish population is considerably smaller. When we moved here from New York, my father had passed away and my mother had told us, don't tell anybody that you're Jewish. So now trying to go back into that environment, I even more strongly feel like I don't belong.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing. And I just I want to chime in and say two things. One is that I think it's very common for Jews, including Jews by choice, to have strong senses of alienation or feeling disconnected or not included in one way or another. So it doesn't surprise me to hear you name that. And I also say I'm always surprised by other people's sense of surprise when they tell me that for them God is to be found in nature, and that far more than being able to access a sense of spiritual connection in a synagogue, for them it's in the mountains or by the river or in their garden. What surprises me is that they think it's surprising or that they're unusual in this, because my observation is that that's true for most of us, that it's when we're somewhere beautiful and expansive, the heart is available to the wonder of it and the sense of the creator behind it, perhaps. Sandy and Franna, love to hear from you, perhaps as concisely as possible, and then we're going to turn to the next sources.
Thank you. I was going to say that I can feel that sense of being other in Jewish community for a variety of reasons, and I'm not going to get into all of them at this point, but there's a few of them. And there's certainly something to be said for individual prayer. I too feel very connected with nature, to go out and pray in nature and that kind of thing. However, I also connect with God through an ethic of caring. And when I'm in the synagogue and we're all doing the Refuah Shlema prayer, for example, I get that sense that, there's other people here who have sick or ill people in their lives that they're concerned about. I'm not the only one. Or doing the Kaddish, I'm saying Kaddish for 11 months for my mother. And again, getting that sense of connection that we're all in the same boat and we're all having this, trying to show love and care for other people. And specifically at Yom Kippur with the Vidui prayer, I also find that sort of reassuring that we're all doing this prayer because we've all, done something this past year that we could, need to come to terms with or that was harmful. And again, this idea that I'm not the only one, we're in the same boat and we're sharing this sentiment together. And there's a certain feeling I get of Hashem being present in those moments.
Thank you so much. Beautifully put. Franna?
So I've been a convert for about 20 years, and I did have a feeling of not belonging, Hebrew being a very great barrier. In recent years, I've given myself permission to move in and out and to not pray with everyone else, but just to hear it as a lullaby or a music to help me. I kind of think of it as sometimes I'm aware of the talit and my individual connection, and sometimes I'm aware of the shul space as being a big tent for all of us. And so that movement back and forth is very helpful for me, and also feeling that I'm not asking what the communal worship can do for me, but what can I do to add to the communal worship. And I feel like I'm needed. I feel like my energy is needed, and that I can actually, because I'm a very enthusiastic convert, carry other people and help lift their spirits and souls.
Beautiful. I love that. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I love that. Thank you for that framing, Franna. Let's turn again to our sources. I think for right now, we're going to, we'll come back to this issue of verbal confession and vidui, which is a huge topic. So I just want to flag that for those who are looking to do pen and paper work in preparation for the high holidays, I highly recommend this source, Vidui, Creating a Spiritual Action Plan by Rabbi David Jaffe. We're not going to do it right now, but I find this to be a tremendously grounded, practical, step-by-step way to bring focus. Because as you say, we can stand in shul and say, Hashamnu, Begadnu, we can say these collective liturgies and litanies of wrongdoing again and again and again, and actually come through at the other side without having really come to any personal clarity about what we need to change. So if you have time and desire, I love this this exercise of creating a spiritual action plan. And he recommends doing this before Yom Kippur, but of course, as we enter the season of Slichot, actually, I should say, Sephardis say, the Mizrahi community says Slichot throughout the month of Elul. It's only the Ashkenazi community that restricts it to the final few days before Rosh Hashanah, just to acknowledge that. But in any case, here's a practice you might want to engage with. But for right now, I'd love for someone to read source number 6 on Tshuva. Cantor Mark, please.
Teshuvah begins with Teshuvah begins with a turn away from the external world and toward the inner realm of the heart. Transformation does not have a beginning, a middle, or an end. We never reach the end of Teshuvah. It's always going on. We're awake for a moment, and then we're asleep again. Teshuvah seems to proceed in a circular motion. Every step away is also a step toward home. And it may never be clear to us that the work of transformation has borne fruit. This is usually the case in the realm of spiritual practice. Real spiritual transformation invariably takes a long time to manifest in our lives. Spectacular, immediate results, sudden changes in aspect or in the way we see the world are always usually suspect, usually suggest a superficial rather than a profound transformation. Profound transformation only manifests over time. The possibility of transformation always exists, but we have to consciously turn toward it in order to activate it. At the same time, our initiative can only take us so far. After that, we have to have faith. We have to depend on the universe to support the flowering of our intention.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think let's read.
Excuse me, I just wanted to.
Yeah,
I wanted
do.
to add a quick song, a quick verse from a friend's song. Stephen Longfellow Fisk wrote "Remembering and Forgetting," and the verse is, "Remembering and forgetting, That's the game that we play. We drift so far, we forget who we are, till we remember that love is the way to remember. It just struck me as I was reading that.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. So Rabbi Lou, I mean, clearly his love of baseball informs this book quite significantly. But he likes to talk about how even as we're moving away, we're still ultimately heading for home, and there's always this ebb and flow. That it's an on and off, it's a both and kind of process. Sure, there is a Safaria link. I'll put it in again. Thank you. There you go. So what I'm interested here in is that, and also this assertion that spiritual transformation takes time, that it never happens quickly, and if it happens quickly, it's a bit suspect, and in fact it may always happen in such a way, or often happen in such a way, that it remains indiscernible to us because of the gradual or integrated nature of the change. So I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts or reflections on either of those points. And if not, I think let's read the next source, where we talk a little bit more again about the mechanisms of avoidance, the resistance to doing this work. So would someone read for us this source? I think it's number 7, Avoiding the Heart. Julie, please.
So I raised my hand to
Oh, did I miss you? Please, yes.
No. I mean, I'm happy to read as well. But I read this book last year, and I vowed that I was going to read it every year at this time. And so I'm very grateful to you for providing these sessions. One of the big things that I took from reading it last year is that for me to be able to be more in the spiritual place is to be present all the time, to be in the moment all the time. Because if I could do that, then I will be grateful, because I'll be able to think like, look where you are and look what you have. So that to me encapsulates the whole thing to me. I mean, it's a very short version of the whole thing, obviously. But for me, this past year, it has been so difficult to stay in that place of being present. That is the challenge for me. And I don't know how to do it. I really don't. I mean, life gets in the way, and that's a bad excuse. But every morning when I wake up, after I say the Modeh Ani, and every night before I go to bed, when I say the Shema, I say to myself, tomorrow you're going to do it. Tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to do it. You'll be able to be present. And I try and I try and I try. And so if anyone in this community can help me with that, I would be forever grateful.
You know, I had the opportunity to sit a meditation retreat with Rabbi Lou many years ago. And I think one of the most profound things I came away with was his teaching that the work of meditation, you know, when we're really getting it, is not when we're staying with our breath, but rather when we catch our distraction and come back to the breath. And in fact, sometimes they do these studies where they hook up people's, they're watching people's brain waves, and they see that that's actually, and they have people press a button so they know what's going on at that moment of awareness and return. That's the practice. Being present doesn't mean being calm. Being present means being present. It means being aware and noticing of what's happening, not necessarily enjoying what's happening or feeling at peace with what's happening, just simply bringing presence Each time you notice that you don't think you're present, that's actually you being present. So I hope that's a helpful thought. And I'd like to ask if someone would read for us about avoiding the heart. I don't know if you would like to, Julie. You're not. You have to unmute again.
Forgiving myself for it.
Yeah.
That's part of it too.
Or accepting that it is how it is.
Mhm.
There's a wonderful line he gives somewhere about forgiveness means accepting that you're not someone. Yeah, here I opened to the right page. To forgive ourselves, we must be willing to give up our ideas about how we might be better.
Mm, mm.
Right?
Thank
It's
you.
acceptance. Yeah. So I'll read this little section, and then I'm going to ask Ben to just put us in groups of 5 people for about 5 minutes so that folks can just, as a teacher, I think it always goes deeper if everyone has a chance to say something. And so we're going to break out into groups for just a few minutes to share. I'll give the prompt after I read this section on avoiding the heart. And this, I think, also speaks to what you were saying, Julie. Why does the heart require such an indirect approach? Why won't it just open wide when we ask it to? Why does it resist us so? We are sentimental about the heart, but the truth is most of us spend a good deal of time and energy avoiding the heart at all costs. Really, we're afraid of what we might find there. We don't even know where it is or how we might find it, but somehow we understand there is a lot of pain there. The heart holds our suffering. In either case, we're inclined not to look at it. We live in a culture that conditions us to avoid suffering, and the consequence is that we live at some distance from our hearts. We're not in the habit of looking at it, but of distracting ourselves from its content. As we begin the process of tshuva, we need to make a conscious effort to overcome the momentum of this denial and avoidance. That pain, that afflictive energy that rests on the surface of our hearts and just below it as well, will be the catalyst for our transformation. This is the great gift of suffering. Intense afflictive states, anger, boredom, fear, guilt, impatience, grief, disappointment, dejection, anxiety, despair. These are the great markers of our teshuvah. By their very intensity, they call us to transformation. So, as we go off to discuss for a little bit, it might be helpful to put a timer on to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak. I know some of us are more comfortable speaking than others. It's great to share your voice with your group. Where are you at in your process, and what do you feel that you need to overcome this momentum, as he calls this, the momentum of denial and avoidance? What do you personally need to overcome the momentum of denial and avoidance and be more engaged with teshuvah this year? So we're going to send you into groups of 5 folks for 5 minutes. And we'll give you a minute's warning when you're about to come back. So Ben, I hope you are still with us because I don't know how to do it. Oh no, I might know how to do it.
I
But
got
Ben,
it.
are you here? You got
I'm
it. Great,
here,
thank
and
you.
we're about to go in 3,
Great.
2, 1.
And it's obviously optional. You don't have to go,
It's like Burning Man.
but you might get more out of it if you do. Hi, John. We're just coming back from breakout room, so everybody else will be back here shortly, just to let you know what's going on. Less than a minute, I think. The breakout rooms are closing in 23 seconds. Oh, welcome back. So, in our final section of class, I want to turn our attention to the idea of God being a forgiving force. Because Judaism has this idea that even though God is the ultimate justice, the arbiter in charge of all, actually God's nature is to be incredibly forgiving. So, as we enter this period of Slichot for Ashkenazis, that's really the focus. And it's the focus of the liturgy that one of the oldest sections of the prayer text comes from the book of Exodus, where God tells Moses, as it were, a sort of a secret code with which Moses and human beings thereafter can call on God to remind God of God's ultimately compassionate nature. And this is what we call the 13 attributes of divine compassion. Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rach Chesed V'Emet, and so forth. So I wonder if someone would read for us the section on God's forgiveness. It's up on the screen here, from pages 135 and 6 and page 148. If you'd like to read, put your little icon hand up. Now,
God's forgiveness. Forgiveness, the desire of God to forgive us, is an irresistible force. It fills every space, like the waters of a flood. It is one of the most powerful forces on earth, nothing less than the need of the world to be what it is, the need of the universe to have us be what we are. That's why we were created, to be the way we are and not some other way. It's precisely the way we are that is sacred in the first place. And it is the nature of God to forgive. This God tells the angels in heaven, and this God tells Moses firsthand in the famous passage from the Torah that's embedded in the High Holiday liturgy. Show me what you're like, Moses pleads with God, and God complies. My name is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I am gracious and compassionate. I am forgiveness itself. This is the very meaning of my name, God is saying. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. The verb to be in the present tense. I am absolute presence, that aspect of the universe that accepts and forgives. This is how God is different from Big Brother, who also knows everything we do and say, but who uses it against us. God watches the whole video with a boundless, heartbreaking compassion.
Thank you. We just have a couple of minutes if anybody has a reflection on this idea of God's forgiveness. Anything anyone wants to say? Beth, you're so patient.
Thank you. I always react to things, so I'm always going to have my hand up. So I don't mind being skipped over for other people at all. I understand. What I wanted to share, a few years ago, 10 years ago, I started studying nonviolent communication as promulgated by the late Marshall Rosenberg. And what Rosenberg wrote is that all violence is the tragic expression of unmet needs. And if you can think of people's bad acts in that light, it's a lot easier to conceive of having compassion for them. And our tradition has a very boundless, powerful God. So it stands to reason that God would also possess a boundless compassion for all of our bad acts. Knowing where it comes from, it's part of the human condition, and our needs haven't been met. And there's a way in which, I mean, obviously, bad people often need to be stopped. There's no question about that. We all understand that. And yet, what happens to them after they've been stopped, it would be great if we could meet them with compassion. DeBarty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. I want to add a couple more thoughts. One of the things that I find so meaningful about nonviolent communication is the idea that needs are never in conflict, but the strategies for trying to meet our needs can easily be in conflict. And so the clearer we can be in simply expressing what the need is, the more we can work together to find strategies where everybody's needs will be met. I think I'll leave it there for now and ask Natalie, what would you like to share? Oh, I had one more thought, but I'll come back to it.
I just want to say, I read the words forgiveness, and I think that for a majority of my life, I've found it very difficult not only to forgive myself, but to imagine a power greater than myself forgiving me. Because if I can't reach inside myself and forgive and ask for forgiveness and feel that lifted from me, how could God possibly? You know, when I read the Tanakh and I see these things, I read these things about sin, and you know, the whole thing on forgiveness and asking 3 times, and if the person doesn't forgive you, then you're forgiven. I mean, I get lost in those things from the Torah, but I just, even at my age, I would have thought that I would have learned this, you know, maybe in my 50s, and now I'm in my mid 60s, and I still find it just impossible. So.
Thank you for sharing. That's so vulnerable. I think that's maybe one of the reasons it's so important to have this idea of a power greater than us that can forgive, because my sort of amateur psychological observation is that when people feel themselves to be bad or unforgivable, there isn't much traction towards behaving better. For as long as we think we're condemned, what's the point? But in feeling what the Christians call grace, that we've been forgiven, that we've been healed, that there's a new slate, it gives us a tremendous opportunity to change. The other thing that Beth shared put me in mind to comment is that there's a line in our liturgy where we say, where we bless God in the morning, She'asali kol tzarki, who is literally means who has made for me all my needs. I think in its original context, it probably means who's provided for all my needs, has provided things to satisfy all my needs. But I actually love it as the recognition that our Creator has also created the needs, that these needs which are never in conflict are also divine. And this, to come full circle to the reference to Robin Wall Kimmerer and the importance of these interdependent ecosystems, that our needs are what put us in relationship with everything. So I find that a heartening thought, that our needs and our lacks come directly from our divine blueprint. And maybe one could even say that the whole of existence has been created because God has some sort of need, a need to be in relationship. If you're a unitive being, it's very complete, but possibly a little bit lonely. So maybe we're here also to meet God's needs. With that thought, I'm going to bring us in for a landing with actually saying the 13 attributes together. They're source number 10, appropriately enough, in the sheet. 10 and 11, in fact, because here is a singable English translation. So, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim Noseh Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh. Hashem, Hashem, Almighty, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in kindness and truth. God preserves kindness for thousands of generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and cleansing the penitent. So I'm going to sing this. I'll sing it once in Hebrew. I'll put the transliteration here too, and then I'll sing once in English. And even though I'm going to ask folks to stay muted so that the sound doesn't get janky, if you're familiar with these words and you'd be able to join in, I invite everybody to chant with me. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, compassion and tenderness, patience, forbearance, kindness, awareness, bearing love from age to age, lifting guilt and mistakes, and making us free. Hebrew once again. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh. So by the time we meet again next Thursday, we will be just 3 days from Rosh Hashanah. So I wish everybody much success and divine support in doing the inner work in preparation, and also in finding a community where you can feel connected and welcomed, and that your prayers can join with the prayers of the collective to affect greater change inward and outward than we can manage on our own. And I'll close our class by blowing shofar for us. see me too. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. I look forward to seeing you next week. And if you go to Slichot this Saturday night, I hope it's a wonderful experience. Take good care.